So what I have done now is I've gone and started to move on to the rear fairing, or I should say the rear canopy. So basically from about here back, there's going to be a polycarbonate clear canopy that's fixed into place. And a lot of the stuff here with the rear canopy is not really documented all that well. I mean, I've got pictures of what these are supposed to look like and how they're supposed to be made, but not any dimensions of anything. So, trying to figure out exactly how to make these, I went ahead and cut these and then I just bent them real quick. I just know that they're supposed to go about right here, I believe. It's supposed to clear this rivet, and then it's supposed to be riveted along here on the fuselage, and it's supposed to conform to the shape of the canopy. Now, I don't know where to drill any of these holes because it's based on the shape of the canopy, not based on any dimensions that I have. So what I've also done too is I've purchased, in fact, I've got it back there, I don't know if you can see it or not, I've purchased the clear material that I'm going to cut the canopy out of, and I'm just going to cut it out based on the shape that's in the plans, and then I'm going to fit these into place based on how that fits flat on the rear fuselage. I don't know of any other way to do it, and obviously I got to curve it and make it look nice on both sides and symmetrical, but so I'm actually going to cut out that canopy frame, or that clear canopy material next. And the other thing I've been working on too is, the hoop, there's supposed to be a hoop that goes back here over the entrance of that rear fixed canopy that's very similar to these. They're made in exactly the same way, where we're going to take MDF forms and we pound them into a shape like this. There's a doubler on the back, and it gets attached to, similar to this, gets attached to this front canopy. That gets attached to these side supports here for the canopy. Now, I went ahead, I got a mess here. I went ahead and already made the hoop for that section in the back. And as I said, that's going to fit, somewhere right in here, let's say. Now, I decided to use a different method of creating this hoop back here. And part of the reason is that the clear material that goes over for the aft canopy here actually gets pop riveted right to the edge of this material here. And so what that means is that if I'm going to make these out of one piece, I really can't put flutes in it. Otherwise, you're going to see through the clear canopy and see the flutes in there, so it's not going to look nice. So the only way to really make these by hand and make them look right is to anneal them and then actually shrink all of the material along there so that you pound it into a perfectly flat, smooth surface. Now that gets even more difficult because the angle of that flange up here at the top is greater than the angle down here in the bottom, so you have to taper this angle all the way around this and get it perfectly smooth with no wrinkles, no ripples, so that when you pop rivet that clear canopy on, that it not only looks nice, but it sits flat. And so what I decided to do is, since I have CNC equipment, it's very easy for me to cut out complex shapes that would be difficult to do by hand, but it's going to save me time if I can actually then not have to worry about pounding this into shape. So what I did is I did a CAD drawing, and I actually just did tabs on here, and then I was able to use an MDF form and easily shape each one of these tabs into the correct curvature. It also gives me the ability to bend those tabs down just a little bit further to change the angle of that that connection there where the canopy is going to pop rivet to that frame. Now, what I did is one other thing is that obviously if I were to pop rivet right to this, which I could, you'd now see through the cutouts that I have on the side of there from making those tabs. So what I did is I went one step further and I created this. Now what this is I cut this out on the CNC machine, and this is cut to the exact curvature and exact shape of the canopy that we're going to cut out on the forward edge. So if I put this over the top of this edge here and curve it around there, it tells me exactly what angle it needs to be bent at, because this will only wants to stay in this shape. But when you bend it into the curve, it will change angles at the top so that they're bent down more at the top and then conforms down to the sides. And what I'm thinking of doing is actually taking this and gluing and pop riveting this all the way along the circumference of where the canopy is going to connect. And what that's going to allow me to do is it's going to stiffen up this edge here that I've notched out, and it's also then going to cover up the notches that I have in there, plus allow me to then drill through the canopy, through this piece here, and through this, and put a pop rivet in between each one of these flutes. So the only reason I did this is it was just easier for me to do because I have equipment that cuts things out very, very quickly and very easily. So creating this by hand would have been a nightmare. Creating all of these, tabbed areas by hand would have taken a lot of work, but what I was able to do is have the machine do all the work, and then I was able to bend it very easily to the correct shape, and now I can just keep moving forward. And the other thing that this did too, none of this stuff do you know if it's going to fit together until you get all of it together. First of all, is this hoop too short or is it too tall? Do I need to take some off the bottom of this when I put it around here or not? Is the canopy that I cut out going to fit? Is it going to be a gap on the bottom? Am I going to have to take something off the bottom of the canopy to get it to fit? There's all kinds of issues that I'm running into here, and then the shape of everything is based off of everything once it's together. So by cutting this out, this is exactly the same length as the canopy, so it's just mimicking the edge of the canopy. And now that I've wrapped that around here and test fit it, I know exactly where the plastic is going to end up compared to this hoop, just using this kind of as a reference. So right now I know I'm really at a good position right now that I feel comfortable going ahead and cutting out the clear canopy, knowing that it is going to fit on here. In fact, I might have to just take a tiny bit off, but I'm going to do that once I have this part on there and once I have the canopy actually clecoed into place. Then I'll worry about adjusting the ends of this to fit at the bottom of the top edge of the fuselage here. The other thing I'm going to do too is once that is all connected to this and I've got that part cut out and kind of to the correct shape, I'm going to lay it over the back of the fuselage here and figure out exactly where the point comes to, and then start adjusting these, bending these a little bit to fit until I get the proper fit. In fact, what I might do is drill through the bottom of that canopy on top of here and cleco that into place to the correct shape before I actually ever drill the holes into the fuselage. But again, it's a lot of trial and error, test fitting, getting all the parts together and fit together kind of all at once in order to determine what needs to be adjusted where. I can't just go ahead and attach these and say, oh, the clear canopy is going to fit when I cut it out. I can't attach this to the fuselage and to these on the ends and then not know that the canopy is going to fit. And I certainly don't want to have to trim that canopy after it's cut out. I want it to cut it out exactly how it's supposed to be on the CNC machine. In fact, the rivet holes that go along here, along this part here, I'm actually drilling those into the clear canopy first. I think that's the best way to make sure that that I've got all of that done and I don't have to do extra work of trying to align the holes on this. I can just put this into place, put the clear canopy on, and just drill through the sheet metal here and then just put clecos in it and start moving forward. So I'm going to keep working on this. This is kind of a whole process of just getting all the things figured out, but I'll show you what it looks like when I get a little bit further. Like I said, I'm going to cut out that clear Lexan, sheet right now, and then we'll start seeing how that fits. Well, I was able to cut the piece of polycarbonate out on the CNC machine. It came out pretty well. As you can see, I did drill the holes for the rivets that are going to go along that bow in the front. Now this is 1 millimeter polycarbonate, or 0.040 40 thousandths, which is what is recommended in the plans. They say you can use 0.8 millimeters to 1 millimeter, although this stuff is super flimsy. So some people have had to put stiffeners in the center of this curvature just because this stuff is so flimsy. It tends to flex a lot when you're flying, and I may have to do that also. I was a little bit concerned about this corner down here. So this is the tip that ends up down here at the bottom of the fuselage, and obviously this needs to come to a point. It needs to be almost bent on the end, and I've heard of other people breaking or cracking this material. Now, polycarbonate, one of the benefits of it is it's not supposed to crack. So I took a scrap piece here and I folded it in half, literally just bent it, and you know, I don't have any cracking or anything at all. It literally stretches to make whatever, you know, complete fold that you want. So I can't imagine there's much of a risk of just putting a little bit of a fold in this corner here just to get it to crease. And the other thing I'm probably going to end up doing down here is doing a little bit of a cover. I think I've seen that on other builds too, where you know, you make kind of an aluminum cap that goes over the end of here and covers the end of this. It also prevents, you know, if there's any cracking that goes on down here, you can cover it up. Especially you can even cut it off here, you know, square it off, and then you know, curve it inside of a piece of aluminum. I may end up doing that also, but so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start fitting this the bow around the top here and see if I can get the holes drilled and start clecoing this around the shape. Once that's done, at least I can set it in here. It's not going to be shaped properly in the back here, but then I can start playing around with the fit. So that's what I'm going to try, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get a little further here. Okay, I think I figured out a starting point here. So from this edge of the canopy here back to where the edge of this is supposed to start, which is the front part of the rear bow here, is supposed to be 425 millimeters. So I went ahead and put a mark there, and of course I measured all of this out when I originally drilled the holes here. So this hole is the first rivet hole just after that, which is supposed to be the first rivet hole going into here. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and see if I can get the front part of these on each side riveted in, or not riveted in, but clecoed into place here along the edge. That'll at least hold this in place. Then what I can do is I can start working on setting the bow in place right here, because this is where it's supposed to get attached with a you know, temporary sheet metal fastener. I can hold that into place, have the bow go over, and I can hold that one rivet into place. And then what I'm going to do is just run a piece of string from here over to the top of the bow and try and just get the angle approximately where it needs to be, just so I can at least hold that thing into place while I try and fit the rear skin over the top, the canopy over the top, so I can start drilling the holes into it to, you know, again, start holding all of this into place. Now, one of the benefits I also found of using this as a layer over the top edge of here is that I don't have to joggle the end of this, because this is going to mount right behind here and get riveted to it, but then this is going to meet up flush with the outside of this lip here and wrap around the top to the other side. So I also don't have to joggle the ends of those, which is kind of nice. I can actually just start clecoing the corners into place, and then I'll start fitting this around. Now I will have to cut, you know, 6 millimeters or so off the bottom of these, because these are right now too long, because it's intended to go all the way down to the cockpit border there and not stop at the top of that that flange there. So again, I'm going to keep working on this, but I'm going to go ahead and start drilling the holes and get this fit into here. Now I am going to have to cut this off. I made this longer on purpose, knowing that I didn't know exactly where the end of this was going to be, and I didn't know exactly where the edge of the fuselage was. So this is one place where I'm going to have to tape off the bottom of it, do a pencil mark on the bottom, and then sand it off once I get all the holes riveted, or I'm sorry, once I get all the holes drilled into place, so I know exactly where it's going to go. So yeah, let me see if I can get these borders started on the other side. Now I did find out that in the plans there are a few dimensions from the center line here out to where this cockpit canopy edge should be. I might go back and see if I can mark a center line here and then put some tape marks, you know, offset a little bit, because I think it's where the edge of the canopy is. I want to be on the outside of this, so that I can at least get close to at least have the canopy centered on the you know, in the middle here, and not have it off to one side or the other, even though it fits properly. But I'm going to play around with that too, but it's going to take some messing around with some dimensions and just trying to get this fit as close as I can. Okay, let me start drilling these and get some clecos on the corners here, and we'll start there. So some of the rivets here along the top of frame 7, when I glued the fuselage together, I just put in 3/32 rivets just to hold it in place, because this was all being glued. So now going back and looking at the drawings, this rivet right here is supposed to be an 1/8 inch rivet, so I got to drill this rivet out, make this hole bigger, and it's supposed to be countersunk, because this has to fit right over the top of it. And so I'm going to go ahead and drill that out and put a countersunk rivet in there. I believe these 2 rivets are going to have to be drilled out also. This is where the seat back support gets connected. So those will get drilled out at some point and put 1/8 inch rivets in there also. But I'm going to do these right now and do countersunk rivets just so I can keep moving forward with drilling out these holes and get clecos installed in here. And once I get back to this rivet here, I think is where I'll stop on both sides, and then I'll start attaching the hoop, and then we'll start fitting the actual rear canopy cover or polycarbonate over the top. Well, I started drilling the holes here on the canopy around and down to the corner here. I still don't have this attached, but I do have everything lined up here, and I put this clamp here just to keep this frame from just falling out. And I still have it tied here to the front. Now, the position of this doesn't really matter. I'm just really trying to line up the edge of the canopy with that piece of aluminum strip that I have underneath here, and then the frame itself. And I'm just trying to get these holes drilled and get the clecos held into place here. I still have the other side to do, and as you can see, I actually finished this part last night, and I'm going to do the other side today. But the plastic covering that's on the inside of this plastic material I got is actually completely falling off on the inside. So I think I might, by the time I'm done with this fitting, that I might end up having to take all this plastic off anyway, which unfortunately is going to leave some of this a little bit unprotected. But I'm kind of thinking at this point that once I get this drilled, if I get all this drilled along here, and once I get this riveted on the bottom into place, if something ever were to happen to this this clear canopy, I can always just go back to the CNC machine, cut out another piece. Obviously I've got material cost, but I can easily just drill and replace this once I've got the initial fit done here and have all the aluminum supports in the right spot. Actually cutting out a new one and replacing it would be quite easy. The only thing I'd have to worry about is if it's bonded. I have no idea how hard it would be to get the bonding off between here and the aluminum skin. But anyway, I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to see if I can get down the other side here, get the whole thing connected, and then we're going to start working on positioning the canopy along these strips. Now, I did find out that these strips do have to be curved a little bit. I was able to bend those pretty well by hand, just putting some pressure on it and just pulling in one direction, kind of like when we did the angles for the fuselage sides, only obviously we had to use a lot more mechanical force. These do bend fairly easily, so I think I'm going to be able to pop one of these off on one side, bend it to approximately the right shape, get the bottom part of the canopy there, and then what I'm going to do is drill along the bottom of the canopy into this part first, then I'll attach that to the fuselage once I've determined the correct position of those along the rear fuselage. So let me see if I can get the front part done here and at least get that secured. We'll start working on the sides. I've got the other side drilled out here at the front of the canopy. I ended up almost exactly, I'm probably maybe a 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter longer on that end as far as it hitting the bottom here, but it's really, really close. I'm very happy with the fact that there's not a gap underneath either side. So now what I want to do is I want to start working on the side supports here. Now there's an obvious problem in that it hits and rests on the bottom there, but is up in the air here. There's a gap underneath the canopy. So trying to get it to hold it down into place to figure out exactly where these are supposed to go is going to be a little more difficult than I thought. I might actually step back here and pull these off, see if I can curve these to close to where they're going to go. The other thing I did too is I left these a little bit long, but had drilled out the holes here, and so this has to go on the inside of the canopy, so this is going to have to be cut short before the tip here. And there's no picture in the plans at all that I can find that shows how this is supposed to be done, other than they show this ending somewhere in here. And then of course there is supposed to be a strip of aluminum that goes along the outside of the canopy here that goes through the canopy and pop rivets to this, so the canopy obviously sits on the outside edge of this bent up flange here. But then they just show that just ending at some point down here at the corner of the canopy, but maybe not going all the way down to the end. I guess it probably could go close to the end and be cut off, but I've also seen people who have made like an aluminum shroud that fits over the end of this that kind of covers all of this down here, which I'm probably going to end up doing also. But first I want to get these installed where the canopy needs to go. I'll worry about cover plate to make it look nicer afterwards. But trying to figure out the next step here. I obviously have to curve these so that they basically come to a point here wherever the end of this canopy is supposed to be. I'm going to try and get that done right now, because at least if I do that, I should be able to push this canopy down along the outside there, maybe figure out where to cut these off. And then if I get these cut off, I should be able to fit the canopy down in around that, around that position. And hopefully that's going to be close to where it's going to go. I'm hoping what I can do is actually attach this to the bottom edge of the canopy and then worry about, side to side of these supports here and getting them centered on the fuselage by measuring from the edge back to maybe a rivet hole on each side. But again, like I said, because of the curve of the bottom of the canopy here, that's really going to determine the curve of that aluminum piece. And because I don't know what that curve really is, I have to just base it off the canopy itself. So I'm going to keep working on this, see if I can get, as I mentioned, some of these things curved, get the ends of these cut off, and just keep working on seeing what I can do here to get this to fit. And I'll show you what it looks like when I get a little bit further here. All right, I decided just to work harder, not smarter. No, work smarter, not harder. I think that's what it is. All right, so I decided to work smarter, not harder. There are 3 dimensions that are listed in the plans on, I think, drawing 201 that do show a mark from the center line or a measurement from the center line out to the canopy here and at where the tip is supposed to be. So I went ahead and drew a line down the center of exactly where the middle of the fuselage was, just measuring from the end there and lining up with this center rivet here, which should be right in the middle. And then I marked off those 3 stations. And then I went ahead and measured from there out the dimension that it says it should be in the plans. I did move this in about 2 millimeters just so I could still see it on the inside edge of this piece here, because I believe the dimensions on the plans are for the outside edge of the canopy. So it does show exactly where I need to bend this to. Now this does not conform to this shape very easily, especially to get it to stay flat. So I am going to have to bend this a little bit more on both sides to be able to get this to go where it needs to go. But I think that's what I'm going to do, is just go ahead and curve this so that it hits each one of these marks. I'm going to go ahead and drill and cleco this into place. Then I'll come back and fit the canopy over the top of it, and we'll see how that lays. I'm assuming it's got to be good. If not, I might just have to trim the bottom edge of the canopy to make it fit, because I don't see any easier way to do this. The canopy's too flimsy to be able to try and use the canopy as a guideline, and it's too hard to pinch it together and hold it into place. And then on the end here, this is where the tip's supposed to go. So what I'm gonna have to do is cut this off, angle this, and figure out exactly how to finish the end of this so that it still fits inside of the inside edge of the canopy. So let me keep going here. The other thing that worked really well is using a metric yardstick. I was able to put this underneath these pieces here, and then actually align the rivets, or align this with this mark here, and align it on the edge with where the rivets are, because I know the rivets are in the right spot because they were done on a CNC machine. It wasn't really done by hand, so I'm kind of using those as my alignment this way to make sure that my measurements out are correct. So I'm gonna keep playing with this, and I'll be back in a little bit to show you what it looks like. So I was able to curve the first one here. As you can see, it's got quite a bit of curve in it. It's got a little bit of curve both directions, but it seems to straighten out and flatten out when I put it in here and just press it down. But I'm going to try and do the same thing to the other one, and what I've decided to do is I am just going to go ahead and line that up with these lines, and I'm going to go ahead and drill out a few holes, cleco it into place, and then just check the fit on the aft canopy here. I don't know of any other better way to do this, so I think that's the best way to go. Now, to bend this, let me show you what I did. I actually created a little jig right here. As you can see, I have the profile of the that cockpit border, rear canopy border, and what I'm doing is just pulling it through here, trying to stretch the flat bottom edge here. And what you got to try and prevent yourself from doing is pulling down, because then you'll stretch it along the top, which then gives you a compound curve, which you don't want. So I was trying to pull it through here and pull it up as I would pull it through here to try and keep the top from getting stretched so that it would bend, not bend down, but bend sideways. This worked really well, so I'm going to go ahead and try this on the other side. I do have to just flip it around, and then I can just pull it the other direction, and I'll get the other side curved also, and we'll start putting some clecos in there to hold those into place. We'll see how that canopy fits. All right, I've got a good enough curve in both of these now where I feel comfortable going ahead and drilling a few of the holes into the rear fuselage. So what I'm going to do is where the tape mark is, I'm just going to cleco it in the front here. I'm going to get this pretty much on the backside edge here right next to that tape mark. I'll drill this side, cleco this side, and then I'll make sure that after I get this side done, when I do the other side, that I also measure from the edge of the fuselage or from possibly one of these rivets or something back to this trim piece here, just to make sure that at least they're symmetrical side to side. And I did cut the ends off here. I know this isn't going to be exactly where these are going to end up. I think it's going to have to be shortened a fair amount, especially to get the tip of the canopy into here. But since I'm trying to keep this as clean as I can, I'm just going to leave it a little bit long and then come back and try and trim some of this stuff up and figure out how to finish off this tip that's going to end up down here. So let me go ahead and cleco these into place, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're ready to fit the canopy or the rear canopy back on here, and we'll see how well it lines up. All right, well, I guess we're ready to fit the canopy back on here and see what happens. The canopy actually fits pretty well. The nice thing also is that the clecos in here actually act as holders, so that the more clecos I put into this strip here, the more it will actually hold the canopy into place, because it's supposed to fit on the outside of that lip there. Now, I've got a big mess back here. You can see where the end line's supposed to be. That's pretty much where that tip is going to end up. But you see all the sheet metal's in the way, especially when we think about the fact that this has got to conform over the bottom of these angles. So I'm going to have to cut these off probably back here. I did extend these a little bit longer just because I wasn't sure where they were going to end up, and I want to make sure that I had enough rivet holes holding this together. But my guess is that this is going to end up being the last rivet hole, not this one here, especially since this is fitting on the inside. Now, the strip that goes over the outside of this that gets riveted to this could extend further all the way down to the corner past the end of this. But again, I'm just going to really have to play with this and try and get this to fit together here as best I can. This is going to be the hardest part, I can tell. The rest of this is going to be pretty easy. So yeah, I mean, it's working. I'm able to install this, so and it is pretty stiff, but you can feel how it is very soft here on the sides. I can it's stiff up here on the top for sure. But I can understand why you almost need to put some stiffeners on the inside of here to prevent this from bowing in, because it's actually quite soft there. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to cut these off, see if I can start fitting some of this in. I'm going to get some more clecos in here to hold this in, and once I get to the point where this is sitting on the bottom of this trim piece, I'll start drilling the holes through the canopy. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to cut out that strip that goes on top of there, and I'm going to pre-drill the holes in that strip with a CNC machine, so that once I lay that strip up here, I can just go down and drill through the strip, go through the canopy, and through the this back lip support there. So let me keep working on this, and I'll show you when I get a little bit further here. I cut off these metal parts right down to about 6 millimeters or 8 millimeters from the end of the last hole. This seems to be pretty close to where it's going to need to fit if I pull these together. But what I think I'm going to do is, this is so stiff back here that I almost need to crease right back here in the corner where this is going to come to a point. So I think what I'm going to do is take this canopy off and just see if I can somehow clamp or something here, and see if I can just get the end of this to bend, hopefully without cracking. I don't think it's going to crack. As I've tested here again, I mean, I can just fold this stuff right over, and it doesn't. There's no crack in there at all. So I really don't think cracking is going to be an issue. But I'm going to see if I can get a little crease in there, because I think that's the only way I'm going to be able to pull this tight enough here to be able to rivet it into place. I could actually heat this a little bit, but I'm a little concerned that if I heat it, it's it's going to melt. The other thing I found out is that I tested heating that part of the head over there, and it didn't seem to make any difference. I mean, it's still just bent without a problem. So I'm gonna have to see if I can just figure out how to get this to come together a little bit tighter in the back here before I can even attempt to start to drill out the lower holes here. So let me mess around with this. I'll see what I can come up with. Hopefully I don't wreck it. Well, I think this is the best I'm going to be able to do. Cutting these off where that last rivet hole is, you know, looks like a good way to go. I think what I'm going to do then is go ahead and line these up with the end mark here where the end of the canopy is ending up. And I'll go ahead and make it so that these are at least held in the correct position here at the end. I did put a little bit of a crease, I don't know if you can see it in the light here, in the end of this, just to get this so that I can bring this together. Otherwise there's no way that would want to conform. It's even very tight. I mean, it's so tight right now for me to pinch. I don't even think the clecos and the aluminum strip out here is even going to hold this thing into place. But what I think I'm going to do then is, now that I've gotten it this far, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the aluminum strip that's going to go on the outside of here. And then what I'll end up doing is I'll just work my way from the front all the way to the back, just, you know, drilling out the, you know, one hole, putting in a cleco, going to the next one, and keep working my way all the way down to the end, trying to get this canopy fit all the way down to the bottom of this and held there where it needs to be. I'm going to also have to go back and drill some more of these holes out too, because otherwise this aluminum strip is going to want to lift and move, because again, all this is very, very tight. So this is 1 millimeter thick. If you go any thicker than this, there's no way you're going to get that corner to bend down there. At least it's going to be even harder and stiffer in this area to get this to conform to shape. And this stuff is kind of weird in that you can't just bend it and then have it retain a shape that you've bent like the aluminum does. It's so flexible up to the point where it crimps or creases that it's very difficult to get the tension out of it without further putting in additional creases into it, which I don't want to do a crease up here. I don't want it to show up here. Down here there's nothing I can do. It's got to come to a point anyway, and my guess is that's why people will cover this area with a fairing, because they'll cover the crease on the end here and, you know, leave it looking nice where there's a decent shape back here. But I'm gonna keep trying to just fasten this down and see if I can just get it pulled into the right shape, and we'll see what it looks like. I might up here in the front, I'm actually out of the 3/32 clecos. I've got all of my 1/8 inch clecos, and most of the holes up here are going to be 1/8 inch. So what I may do is go and drill some of these holes out so that I have some more clecos to be able to hold this into shape, because I'm going to need clecos in almost every hole, both on the side of the canopy and on the base of the canopy. The only other option, another thing I could do, is I could rivet this into position if I know this is where this is going to go, and that might be the easier thing to do right now, is go ahead and put all the pop rivets in there, and then I only need clecos holding the canopy on. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any reason not to, but yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. This does need to be glued into place, so what I could do is tonight before I leave, I could glue and pop rivet these on. In fact, there's no reason not to that I can tell, and then I can come back tomorrow and be able to make sure that the canopy is fitting properly. I do need to trim off this here because I didn't have the correct fuselage curvature here. I actually extended these over a little bit, so I'm going to put a piece of blue tape on the bottom of this, draw a mark on there, and go ahead and sand those down and trim those to fit nicely on the edge. I might do that real quick with both of these and just prepare these to be glued tonight. I'll keep working on the fit here, and I'll get the strip you know, cut and, you know, with the holes pre-drilled into it and see how far I can get. But I think I'm going to have to go ahead and glue that down tonight. Here's the tape I put on the back side of this piece of trim. I'm going to go ahead and take this over the sander and just sand it right down just past that line, which should be right at the edge of the fuselage here. I'll do that to both sides, and I am going to finish prepping these and just glue and rivet these into place. There's just no reason not to. I did verify where the end of this is, and it's about 3 millimeters short of the actual line that I put here, and so I'm just going to make so that these end up with the outside of this basically right inside of that, maybe 5 millimeters, just to make sure that we have room for the you know, the tip in there. But that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to glue these and pop rivet these in tonight. So I've got all the 3/32 holes drilled out along this strip. I went ahead and drilled these out to an 1/8 inch, which is what are supposed to get the bigger rivets here on the fuselage corner support here. I do have these 2 other rivets that I'm supposed to put in here. They're supposed to be kind of close to this edge of this lip. There's no dimensions for them really, so what I decided to do is just go halfway in between these, put a mark, and then come 5 millimeters off the side and put a mark there to set that rivet. And then what I did is just measured from this rivet to this rivet and put one right in the middle, again 5 millimeters off the edge. I didn't want to get these too close to this lip here, just because the canopy is going to be going over that, and that piece of metal is going to be, trim piece is going to be going over on top of that, and I just didn't want it hitting the top of that rivet. I'll show you in the plans over here what these look like, because they're not supposed to be lined up where you would expect, 6 millimeters off the edge from here. They're kind of randomly put right here. You walk over here, you can see in the plans. All right, so it's these 2 rivets right here, just tucked right next to the edge almost, not spaced evenly to what any of these really are, because this is a bigger space here, this is even a bigger space here and a smaller space, so I don't know. Again, I just decided to hit the center of that rivet and then do the center between those 2. I don't think it matters either way, as long as there's 2 rivets in there, which I went ahead and did. So I'm going to do all the prep work now to glue these onto the fuselage. So I'm going to take the plastic off of both sides of these. I'm going to Scotch-Brite the back side of this strip. I'm going to go ahead and take the plastic from frame 7 here all the way back to the tail, just off the top. I'm probably going to have to put this back onto the fuselage and just tape around this so that I can scuff up the rear fuselage in just the spot where this is going to be glued. But yeah, that's what I'm going to try and do, is get this glued in before I leave. Now tomorrow I'm going to come back and we're going to start attaching the canopy. Now the canopy really can't be permanently attached until we figure out what I'm going to do with this surface here in this area. This really should be painted, either white, gray, some kind of color. Maybe if your plane's going to be a different color, it should be painted that color. But this is kind of where we need to start thinking about color choices and what we're going to do. I'm probably going to paint this white, I believe. I haven't decided 100%. A lot of the area in here from frame 7, up to frame 2, I was actually thinking of also painting the interior white. I could do gray though. Again, I haven't purchased anything yet. I'm still trying to think through the process myself, but I won't permanently glue and pop rivet that rear canopy in until I've made that choice, which is going to have to be in the next week. So let me just start doing all the prep work here and we'll get these angles glued onto the fuselage. I had to take a video of the pretty aluminum here that I pulled the plastic off of. You can see the residue on the side from where the glue was wiped off along the edge here with the acetone. It literally would just wipe right off with acetone further, but it's really nice to see the actual bare aluminum. Pretty. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put these on there and go ahead and tape around these so I can scuff this up in the spots that I need to. So I was able to get this glued and pop riveted into place, both the borders for the rear canopy. I let it sit overnight, so I'm back today, and I'm ready to go ahead and start fitting the bottom edge of the canopy along here, and we'll go ahead and start drilling the strip that's going to go over the top of this on the outside of the canopy, drill all the way through the canopy and into here and start clecoing it into place. You can see how I did the rear part here. Hopefully you can see the sun is kind of shining in here. See if I can go around the other side. Also, here's the strips that I cut out on the CNC machine. I pre-drilled all the holes, so we should be able to just align those with the end here and just work our way down, drilling it out and clecoing it, the canopy and that strip as we go. But you can see back here. All right, I'm gonna get this out of the sun. Maybe that's a little bit better. Okay, now you can see where the ends here. Now this goes on the inside of the canopy, so we're going to fit the canopy around this. That strip's going to come around the top, and then we're just going to have to end that strip at some point. I'm hoping to take it all the way to the end of the canopy tip, but we'll just have to see where it ends up. And but anyway, I'm going to start putting the canopy back on here and see if I can start aligning some of these holes here and start drilling from the front, work my way back. All right, so I'm starting to drill the holes here and go around. I just started with the first one here with the canopy in the right spot, the trim in the right spot. This actually is a job that requires almost 4 hands, because you really have to push down on the canopy to get it to seat down into that that angle there, and then you've got to push it in, you've got to hold the trim in and down, and then you've got to drill it all at the same time. I'm here trying to do this by myself, so it's a little bit more difficult, but what I've done is I'm using a clamp to push the trim and hold the canopy against the side here, and then I'm actually using clear tape on the canopy with the covering on it, obviously, and I'm pulling that tape really tight and taping it to the side of the fuselage so I can keep pressure down on it, so that I can get in here with my fingers, hold this trim piece down, as you know, at the very base of this angle here, and then be able to drill the hole. It's a little bit of a convoluted situation here, because this thing is just so hard to control where it's at. Now, what I decided to do is I haven't hooked the other side up at all. I've decided I'm just going to do one side and then go and position that one and push the canopy down on that side. I think it's going to be too difficult to try and do each side at the same time, which is what I had intended to do, was to start here on each side and just work my way back, going back and forth and putting the canopy down, but it's just too cumbersome to try and do it. So I'm going to keep using this method. I know I've just got to get from here back to that corner and keep it flat. There's nothing else that I can really do, so it's just a matter of doing that here, going to the other side, and then trying to repeat that process on that side. So I'm gonna keep going here, see if I can keep this looking as decent as I can. All right, well, the tape pulling down on the canopy worked pretty well until I got back here where it was a little bit further away from the side of the fuselage, and right in this area I started having some issues getting that canopy, just holding it down into place as I drilled the hole. So I kind of came up with a new solution here. What I decided to do is take the trim off and just align the trim along the holes I'd already drilled, and then go ahead and just drill out the rest of the holes in the canopy following the holes on the trim. And then what I'll do is I'll take the canopy off, I'm going to put the trim back onto the angle that I have here, and then I'll just drill the holes in the angle. Hopefully that'll make it so that I can go back now and then just kind of work my way from the front to the back, just pinning the plastic canopy here into place. I'm hoping that's going to work. It's not ideal. I'd like to be drilling it as I go, but it's just too hard to hold everything while you're doing it. So I'm going to take this off and go ahead and drill the rest of the holes through the angle there, and then we'll see if I can detach this whole side, and then we'll start working on the other side. Well, I'm not sure why I didn't decide to do that to begin with, as far as just drilling the holes through the trim, through the canopy, and then putting the trim on the angle there and drilling through it, because this worked perfectly. Once I had the holes drilled, I was able to just push the canopy down, just cleco as I went, and or not as I went because the holes are already there, but just cleco along there, and I had no problem getting the canopy to fit on this side. Now, what's interesting too is now when I go to this side, let me go to the other side here so you can see it, but tripping over the airplane. But now you can see on this side, I can push the canopy down into place, and you can see I can end up with, I gotta push down a little bit further, but you can see I can get it fit all the way down along there without really any problem now that it's attached on the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the same technique I did on the other side, get this side drilled, and we should be able to cleco this in. I'm starting to run out of clecos though. But I think I can reduce this to every other one on this other side here and start using them on this side. But yeah, this is going to work out just fine. I'm going to go ahead and finish drilling the rest of these holes, and we'll see what it looks like when I have it all together here. Well, the rear canopy is on. It took some effort to get this last side attached down here and just get the canopy rounded, stretched enough to just fit. Now, one of the things I did find that made from about here back on the final side much easier was I disconnected all of the sheet metal fasteners up here around the hoop, and it allowed me to get a little bit more pressure down and a little bit more force, so I wasn't trying to stretch against what was already here, and I was able to finish attaching the bottom here along the final side. And then it was actually quite easy just to open this back up enough and just fit the hoop back in here, so that really wasn't an issue. But just a suggestion, if it gets really tight along the last section that you're doing, if you disconnect it from the hoop, it relieves a lot of the tension up here that might be pulling against what you're trying to do down here on this side. Now, one of the things I noticed right away when it's on here is it's nice and tight here. The actual end here didn't turn out too bad. I mean, obviously I have to cut these off and trim these and so forth, but I mean, the tip is going to be there no matter what, and it's really just a matter of, you know, eventually maybe creating a little fairing that covers up this end piece. In fact, I might rivet something to these here and rivet something on the corner that covers this end. But otherwise, I mean, it's decent. But I've now figured out why other builders have had to put supports inside of the canopy, you know, basically another hoop. Some people have put one, some people have put two, some people have just glued some stiffeners along the side here in a couple spots. So the issue with the canopy now that it's done is there's a huge amount of tension back here. There's a huge amount of tension running up the center here because of where the ridge is. And of course there's a lot of tension between here and wrapping around here. But where there's not any tension really is right here. The skin that's pulling here can't really pull on this hoop. There's really no, this hoop is too weak. It doesn't provide any stiffening at all. It just provides stiffening for the shape that it is in right now. Well, what's happening now is it's actually sucked in a little bit here. In other words, I can go on the inside here and I can push it out. That's really where it should be. But I'm not so sure. Now, it could be a couple different things. It could be this angle here, that you know, maybe I need to bend this angle out a fair amount more along here so that this skin isn't naturally wanting to have the tendency to go inward. But you know, if I were to take a let me go to the other side here, because I've got the same issue on both sides. It's doing exactly the same thing, and I think you can see here in the light, see how it's sucked in, and I can actually just push it out. So it needs some extra pressure here, but I can't really create any additional tension between here and here because this is too weak anyway. It's really just pressure against itself. So I think what I'm going to do is I can tell this angle between here and here really needs to be bent more up at 90 degrees. That may help. That's what I'm going to try first, but it's obvious at some point that, you know, stiffening this this is almost necessary. Again, there's a lot of tension right here because of the circle part, but once it gets into this void here, it starts to have some issues. And like I said, I don't really see how I can create any more tension, even if I were to, you know, have re-drilled the holes or maybe even trimmed the bottom of the canopy and pushed it down. Could I create a little bit more tension? Maybe, but I don't know how to get any pressure on there to actually, you know, get it a whole lot better. But certainly bending that angle out is probably number one fix that I'm going to try to do. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's on. I mean, I can't really complain about it. I think it is what it is. All right, so let me take this off here on this side. I've got to do some more work on these anyway, and I've got to get these brackets on the inside, these supports that are supposed to be riveted in place here. So let me work on a few more things here, and I'll see if I can get this a little bit better on the sides here. I went ahead and just disconnected the canopy back here about, I don't know, 40% of the way down. And then what I did is I just bent this flange out from the inside here. That fixed 90% of this. I mean, it's in the correct shape. It's just not very strong right here, which is, you know, I guess to be expected. But that did fix right here, this sunken part of the canopy. I mean, I can still push it out a little bit, but again, it's just because it's flimsy. I could probably, you know, try and bend that a little bit more, but I think I've actually got the angle quite good. So I'm going to do the other side. I think it's going to take care of, again, 90% of that side. We're going to have to do some kind of stiffener here at some point, I think, to just stiffen up the canopy. But otherwise, looks great. I'm trying to figure out the best way to finish off this tip here. As you can see, I've got the inside angle in there. I've got these two clecos in there, but then I've just got this sheet metal hanging off the end, which obviously doesn't want to conform to that tip at all. Part of me is actually wondering is if we shouldn't almost be cutting the end of this canopy off just behind, you know, maybe 6 millimeters or 10 millimeters behind where the last rivet hole is here, just to relieve the stress back here. And then what I've started to do is just create a cover plate to put over the top of this that I can hopefully, you know, get the last 2 clecos in. I'm going to keep cutting it down to size until it fits right tightly on top of there. But this is what I'm thinking about doing to just finish this off, is something like that, which I've seen other people do. I haven't seen them up close to know exactly how they're doing it, but I figured this is the best way to do it anyway. And what I may do is put this behind that doubler plate there over the canopy. But anyway, this is what I'm just trying to fit into place here. But again, I'm trying to figure out if it's worth even leaving this tip on here and this point on here, but I'll keep working this down until it fits. And this was quite easy to do. All I did is took a piece of scrap and I just bent one edge of it in the center. And then I started shaping it around, and then just went back and started cutting these angles off to approximately where, you know, I felt those angles would end up with this, and then just started sanding down the front here until I got the, you know, the shape that I wanted. I'd like it to match the same angle as here possibly, just so it kind of conforms, but I'm just going to keep working this down until it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then until it fits over the top of this, and we'll just see how this fits in the end. But I think this is going to be the best fix for this, and just cover it up. I think it'll look good too. So let me keep working on this, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get it shaped a little bit more. Just wanted to point out, I did cut the tip off of this just to get rid of all that tension that was down in here where that was folded. And you know, hopefully I won't have any issues with it. I don't believe so, but it made it a little bit easier to get this bent around the corner here so that I can fit that cap over the end. It's not going to show anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep fitting this cap over the top. I did finish one side. I just really had a hard time getting the other side clecoed into position here, just because of that, again, that tension that was on there. So we'll see if this works a little bit better. I'm going to keep fitting my little cover over the top, which is actually looking really nice. So let me see if I can get the other side clecoed on, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I did trim off this side too. I'm going to trim off the other side here, just past the hole here, just like I did on this side. And we'll see if we can get this looking nice. All right, well, here's the little tip I put on the end of the fairing. Now that it's complete, you can see I trimmed off the trim piece that mounts on top here. I just cut it off so that it ended, it was about the same angle as the canopy, and then I had it end at the end of the angle that's underneath. It looks pretty good. I'm actually quite happy with how this turned out. I wasn't sure how I was going to finish this. Now, what I am thinking about doing here is on these last 2 rivets, I might put 1/8 inch rivets here on each side. The reason is there's so much tension here between the metal here, the plastic here, the outside angle, that I know my 3/32 rivets like I used here, which are aluminum rivets with an aluminum mandrel, they don't pull very hard. They're supposed to be strong once they're in, but as far as it pulling this all the way together and clamping this material, I think I'm going to have to drill these out to an 1/8 inch, because the AVEX rivets with the steel mandrel in them pull much harder. In fact, they pull harder than the AAPQ rivets that I've used, you know, up here on the forward fuselage. These here, these are an aluminum mandrel and also an aluminum rivet also. But these AAPQs pull really, I'm sorry, these AVEX rivets pull really hard. And so that's a good place where I might just use those here to make sure that this material gets pulled nice and tight against that angle that's underneath there. But otherwise, I think for now I'm going to call this canopy basically done. I haven't gone back and looked at tensioning this up or fixing this pocketing in a little bit, but I believe what I'm going to do is when I pull this canopy off next time, that inside angle that's from here about to the end, I'm going to bend it out a little bit more, because right now I feel like it's angling in and actually causing the canopy to bow a little bit. And if I can make it so that that angle is actually having the base of it pull out, I think it will fix it all. It's not going to fix the fact that it's not quite as stiff as it should be. I mean, we're probably going to have to put some kind of stiffener in here. I'm not sure if I'm going to put a whole hoop in here or if I'm just going to put a stiffener on the side just to give it a little bit more rigidity. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. Obviously back here it's tight, and across the top here it's tight. It's really just here in this void area right here. But this looks good. I'm actually quite happy with how this turned out. I was really worried about fitting this in, and the fact is I didn't have to modify the shape of this at all. I just cut it out from the plans based on the dimensions there, and I was able to get it to fit, which is great, because now I know I can just, you know, CAD cut out another one of these at any point if I ever need to replace it. And now that the trim is in all the way around, I just have to fit it down in there and just go ahead and drill it out, and I should be good. So I'm anticipating that someday I'll have to replace that, hopefully later than sooner. So let's talk about this though for a minute, since we're talking about this rear canopy. I have sat in this airplane and I have checked the height here, and what I've tried to do is have this come up, continue at a straight line from the canopy angle here, and then start to curve over and then come down on this side without there being a bubble here or without there being too low of a curve here. Now you can see right here I've got a little bit of a where it comes up and then up, but actually if I push it down here to get it straight, what it does is it moves the curvature back, which is actually what we want, because we want this to be a nice straight curve here. We don't want it to obviously be bumping out, but if I push this down to where it should be, you can see it gives me almost probably a quarter more inch of height here. Now I am 8 foot and 8 foot. I am 5'8" and 3/4 of an inch. Exactly. And I think I measured sitting down on the floor to the top of my head is 34 1/4 inches. So I'm under 5'9", but boy, I mean, my hair will hit this right here when I'm sitting in that seat with just a towel on there, just a, you know, fairly thin towel, not stacked up or anything. So I'm actually a little bit concerned about the canopy height. Now, if I can get a little bit more height here by doing this, again, making sure that I'm not, you know, making a bump here, because we need to continue this line straight up. But ideally, we'd continue that straight up as far as we can before we start curving over and back down to that canopy to try and get more head height right in here. But if you are over 5'9", I think you'd have to get a taller canopy. 5'10" for sure. I think the manual mentioned something about the canopy that as it exists is good up to 5'10", but I don't really think so. I really think that it's getting way too close to where you'd almost have to crouch over inside the airplane so you didn't hit your head. And of course, if you have a headset on, that's going to also affect your head height a little bit more even. So it's just some cautionary things to check. I mean, obviously your distance from sitting position to your head is more important than your total height. You know, some people have a longer torso and some people have a shorter torso, so you do have to take that into consideration. But I'm gonna just build mine according to the plans and see where I'm at when I'm done. There's not a whole lot I can do about it. I'm not exactly sure an easy way to lengthen this hoop. I know how to lengthen the hoop, but then to make sure that this canopy fits and is redrawn accordingly. I mean, I guess it should be able to be done as long as we in the CAD drawings made this longer and then compensated it, you know, for it in keeping that length the same, which is what we have to do, because, you know, I think we're going to end up, let's see if we make that longer. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at it on the CAD drawings to see exactly how it would affect the end shape, but that's something that some people are, I'm going to have to experiment with it, and we're going to have to decide if we can use the same canopy or if we have to do anything with the canopy. I'm hoping I can just have it extended on all sides so that it would fit a, you know, potentially a 2-inch taller canopy would be the same canopy, you just wouldn't cut it off on the bottom as much, and make it you know, longer on all sides so that it could be fit into any combination of you know, taller canopies that we need. And going taller than 2 inches on the canopy, I'm not sure at what point you start running into you know, airflow problems, you know, getting air around here and not starting to blank out your tail. But you know, who knows? I'll have to do a little bit more research on that. But like I said, if you're over 5'9", I would be very concerned about you fitting inside of a CriCri with the standard canopy.